All right, UFC 300 is about like 3 months away now, and the UFC last night just announced this. Holly Holm versus Kayla Harrison is going to be on UFC 300. Now, it's not a bad fight. I think we were all expecting a little bit more when Dana White said there's something that he's got. I think he said he has a white rabbit in his hat or something like that, something stupid like that. He just basically said he had a trick up his sleeve still for UFC 300, and this apparently was the trick up the sleeve. Now, I could get into talking about the UFC's bantamweight division. I think likely, I don't know how Kayla Harrison's going to make 135 pounds, but the winner of this fight is likely going to fight the winner of Raquel Pennington and Juliana Pena for the bantamweight championship. However, I still don't know how Kayla is going to make 135 pounds. Despite all of that, UFC 300 is coming up and it is fastly approaching in April. There is still not a main event. Don't get me wrong, it's a really good card. Is it UFC 300 worthy? I think it's really getting there. I mean, okay, we'll just talk about the card real quick, and then we're going to get into the main premise of this video, which is talking about what will main event UFC 300. I have a bunch of options that I think could do it, and we're going to weigh these options, and I'll say what I want to be the main event and what I think is going to be the main event. So Sodiq Yusuff, Diego Lopez is on the card. A really good card. I'm glad Diego Lopez is getting on this spot. He's been on a lot of big cards. He'll be back on another one at UFC 300. Holly Holm, Kayla Harrison should be on the prelims. I have a bad feeling, though, they're going to put that on the main card. Bobby Green, Jim Miller, great fight. Bobby Green's still a top 15 guy. Is coming back a little bit quickly after being knocked out by Jalen Turner, but still Jim Miller gets his fight at UFC 300. He was on 100 and 200. He will be on 300 as well. Deiveson Figueiredo, Cody Garbrandt. Like the fight, I think Figueiredo is going to absolutely run through Garbrandt, but it's a fight that I understand. I think, it was either that for me, it was either get that fight on the card, or if you want Garbrandt on the card, put Dominic Cruz in that spot. I'm fine with Figueiredo and Garbrandt. Bo Nickel, Cody Brundage, you know what's going to happen. Bo Nickel's going to run right through him, but you need Bo Nickel on the card, I guess. Aljamain Sterling's kind of getting screwed in this entire thing. He's still in the prelims, but Aljo will be fighting Calvin Kattar. We will see the state of the featherweight division come April. Will Ilia Topuria be the champion? Will Alexander Volkanovski be the champion? Where do all these pieces of the puzzle fit in? I don't know, but Aljo, with a win, could immediately put himself into a title fight. Weili Zhang, or Zhang Weili, taking on Yang Zhennan. It's China versus China. It's for the strawweight championship. Will it be the main event? I sure hope not, but that is a fight that is on the main card. Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan is supposed to be, the winner will get the fight against Makhachev next. I like the fight. That's a good fight. Prochazka Rakic doesn't really feel like a main card fight to me. I think there are bigger fights. I think that's the fight that will get bumped because, again, you've got Zhang, you got the 115 title fight, you got Oliveira, Tsarukyan, you got Gagey Holloway. We'll see what happens to Leon Bilal, and then if one more fight gets added, I think Prochazka Rakic is the fight that does get booted down the card, which I think it should. It's a good fight, but again, Prochazka coming off a loss. Rakic hasn't been in the octagon in a very long time. Both those guys are coming off losses. Gagey Holloway for the BMF championship, really good fight. The one downside it is for the BMF title, which is a fake championship, but still I like the fight a lot. It's just that can't main event. Leon and Bilal is being rumored. We're going to talk about that fight later, spoiler alert, but that is a fight that, could happen. Is it main event worthy? It's not, but we'll see. So let's get into it, folks. If you haven't yet, though, make sure that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. We will have our predictions for that card with Roman Dolidze and Nasruddin Imavov coming out this Sunday afternoon, so be on the lookout for that. But let's do it. The fights that could potentially main event UFC 300. The first one, to me, is Tom Aspinall and Cyril Gane. Now, the UFC is not going to give Aspinall that chance against John Jones or Miocic unless he defends the championship, the interim championship, which, okay, back in, when I was first starting to really get into the sport, I remember Renan Barão was the vacant bantamweight champion. The interim bantamweight champion. He was filling in for Dominic Cruz, obviously, who was the champion at the time. And you had, again, Renan Barão defending the championship. I believe he defended it, the interim against Joe Soto, I think. Eddie Wineland, that's just off the top of my head. I could be mistaken. I think Wineland might have been for the actual title. No, I think it was for the interim. But this is something that's going to have to happen. You've seen Tom Aspinall's, rants on Twitter. They're going to make him defend this interim title before he gets the winner of Jones-Stipe, if the winner of Jones-Stipe is still around. Now, I think Jones is going to retire. I think Stipe will honestly retire. So I think even though it still has the label as interim championship fight, Aspinall Gane will eventually be promoted to the undisputed world champion. So it is still a big fight, I think, because if this is the main event again, the winner of this fight will eventually one day be world champion. Now, Cyril Gane will be getting a title shot, losing 2 out of his last 4, given the losses are Ngannou and Jones, but the wins, Tuivasa, Sergey Spivak. They aren't the greatest wins in all fairness. Again, the guy's the former interim champion. He could become a 2-time interim heavyweight champion. He beat Derek Lewis back in 2021 to win the first interim championship for him. And Tom Aspinall, you know how good he is. I'm not going to predict the winners of any of these fights. I'm just weighing the options here. It's a good fight. I could see it being the main event, but do you really want UFC 300 being main evented by an interim championship fight? No, I've heard rumors of UFC Manchester. I would assume that'd be UFC 303. No, probably UFC 30. No, they'll probably do 2 pay-per-views in July. So yeah, UFC 304 probably back end of July, like they've done before. I remember they did that a long time ago. Remember they put the Juliana Pena, Amanda Nunes card in Dallas at the end of July after an International Fight Week earlier in the month. So I think that's probably where this fight's gonna end up. It's probably not gonna end up till July, because the May card is going to be. The May card is going to be in Brazil. I don't know if Conor's fighting in June, and then I guess it's in Vegas, but that's a location that could get switched around. But ultimately, I do think this fight does end up sometime in the summer in Manchester. But I'm dealing with a little bit of sickness here. But I think, it's a good fight. Is it really main event worthy though? I don't know. I would be excited for it. I put Aspinall, again, those aren't real odds, but that's my projected odds. -140 for Aspinall seems right, honestly. I think maybe it'd be even bigger of a favorite, but Gane is good. I still think Gane is the best striker in the UFC, in the UFC's heavyweight division. I think, again, his downside is his grappling, and that's probably what he would struggle with a lot if this fight were to be made. But that's the first option, and now we get into the Dricus Du Plessis fights, because there's multiple of these, and it's all dependent on if Dricus can fight. Obviously, Dricus is the new middleweight champion, and this first option we have, you can probably guess some of the other options, but the first option will be the rematch. Dricus Du Plessis, Sean Strickland. I would have no problem with this being the main event of UFC 300. I really like the first fight. I think some people are calling it like one of the greatest title fights of all time. It's not on that level. It's a really good fight, though, but it's not even like the greatest middleweight title fight. Like, let's just be honest, Adesanya Gastelum was better, but this was still a really good fight between Du Plessis and Strickland, and I wouldn't be against seeing the fight again. Now, again, I understand why people would not want Strickland to get an immediate rematch because he never defended the title, but at the same time, I'll point, okay, well, Israel Adesanya, and, again, you can probably tell who's going to be next on this, but Israel Adesanya never defended the championship either in that second run with the belt, so why not give Strickland this shot? Because Strickland was more competitive in his loss, where he lost the world championship compared to what Adesanya had against Sean Strickland. So, again, I wouldn't be against this fight, but it's all going to come down to if Dricus Du Plessis can fight. You saw his face after the Strickland fight. I don't know if he can really quickly turn this around to April. However, I think he'd be really motivated to do so because all those pay-per-view points he's going to get. Main event at UFC 300, at least, I think, 1 million buys for this card, right? No matter, who's on the card, it is UFC 300. 200 did very well. Now, there is no Brock Lesnar, Daniel Cormier, or Anderson Silva on this one, but still, like there was on 200. But I do feel like this would be a big-time fight that they could pull Du Plessis and Strickland, and it'd be a really good fight. I think the odds would be about even, but again, it's all dependent on how Du Plessis is come April. So that's a fight that they could do. Another fight, Du Plessis Adesanya. Now, I think the lines would have Izzy as a favorite. I personally wouldn't say so, but I think the way Vegas would set this fight, I think they would have Israel Adesanya as a slight favorite. Now, again, this would be the other fight. There's going to be another one with Du Plessis that I'm going to bring up next, but Du Plessis Adesanya, I think, is the biggest fight the UFC can make for UFC 300, considering all the guys who, most realistic fight that they can make. It's the best fight, the biggest fight, considering the circumstances around UFC 300. Obviously, they'd want John Jones in this card. Not going to happen. Jones is their biggest star. I guess they did. I mean, O'Malley really doesn't draw how people think he does. So they, as long as their biggest guy was John Jones for this card, if they can't get John Jones, their next best option for pay-per-view buys is likely Israel Adesanya, right? So this is a heated fight. You saw the face-off after Du Plessis beat Robert Whittaker at UFC 290 last year. At the time, Izzy was the champion. Well, Izzy lost the belt to Strickland, then Du Plessis took the belt off of Strickland. So this is a big fight. Personally, I would rather see Strickland. I think Izzy, he's got to win a fight because you can't get 2 immediate rematches after losing your championship twice. because he lost to Pereira. He got the immediate rematch. I had no problem with him fighting Alex for a second time, right? But right after you drop the belt to Strickland, and now you're going to get an immediate rematch at Dricus du Plessis, or not immediate rematch, but an immediate, like, another title shot. I personally don't like it. I don't think Izzy should get the fight, but if I'm trying to sell pay-per-views, though, who cares about deserving? This is the fight you should make, du Plessis and Adesanya, and I think it is the fight the UFC will at least attempt to make. I don't know if Dricus will be ready for this date. And speaking of being ready, this is not, okay, that fight's coming up later, but this is another fight that, like, I think Jared Cannonier is actually the most deserving guy in the middleweight division for a championship fight. I didn't even include Khamzat in this video because I don't think Khamzat has not beat a middleweight yet. He hasn't. He beat Kamaru Usman, who's a 170 pounder. And then the fight before that, he beat Kevin Holland at a catchweight of 180, and Holland fights 70 now. That doesn't warrant a title shot. You know what does warrant a title shot? Jared Cannonier beating Sean Strickland and Marvin Vettori in back-to-back fights. Now, in terms of drawing power, this is out of the fights I've mentioned so far, even including Aspinall Khan, this is likely the least drawing pay-per-view main event. Jared Cannonier, Dricus du Plessis. But if you're trying to maintain the integrity of the sport, this is probably what you have to make next. Now, again, we don't know, as I said earlier, I don't know if Jared Cannonier will actually be ready for the date. He was supposed to fight Roman Dolidze at the end of the year, or I believe it was on the San Antonio card. I think that was San Antonio or Austin. It was Austin, okay. In December, he's supposed to fight Roman Dolidze. He blew out his knee. I don't know if Cannonier will be ready for April, but if he is, this is the fight that I think would make the most sense in terms of an MMA perspective. Because again, like, Cannonier's only loss in the last 4 years is Adesanya for the belt, and since then he has beat Sean Strickland. Now, given it was a controversial decision, but still he beat Sean Strickland, and he beat the brakes. He beat the crap out of Marvin Vettori last summer. So, again, deserving-wise, yeah, Jared Cannonier should get the next title fight. I put the odds at around, like, minus 200 Dricus du Plessis, because I think that's kind of where he would be sitting at. But, again, I think Jared really deserves a title fight. He's 39 years old. This is make or break time for Cannonier if he's ever going to touch the belt. But I don't think they're going to do this, personally. I think they're going to make Jared Cannonier probably fight Khamzat Chimaev, or they'll make him rematch Sean Strickland, depending on how they book the title situation. This is probably the longest shot out of every fight I had to put, but I had to show some love for Jared Cannonier because I think this is a guy that's not getting talked about at all for the World Championship. I think he's absolutely deserving. Will he get the title fight? He won't. But I thought I'd throw it in here. But I'm not putting Chimaev on this. We're going to go to Edwards Muhammad too. Now, I don't want this main event. I really do not want this main event at all. I think jokes aside with Bilal Muhammad being boring, because he kind of is at times, and Bilal just not being an exciting fighter, and him having absolutely no drawing power, why would this main event UFC 300? The biggest card in UFC history cannot be main evented, I'm sorry, by Bilal Muhammad. And in all fairness, it can't be main evented by Leon Edwards either. Leon Edwards had a big platform on his last fight. And now, I'm not saying Leon shouldn't be main eventing pay-per-views anymore. I'm not saying that at all. But Leon got UFC 296, the last card of the year last year, against a guy who was talking about out-wrestling him and sending him to hell to visit his father. And he didn't finish the fight. Now, I don't know the circumstances around Colby Covington. I think people think Colby got hurt in that fight, or at least he was coming into the fight with an injury. And okay, yeah, Colby hadn't fought in about a year and a half going into that world title fight, and Colby is older now. And Leon still couldn't get the finish, and Leon was losing on his back at the end of the fight. Rewatching the fight, watching the fight, I thought Leon won 4-1. I rewatched it. I think Leon won 3-2. I gave Colby an extra round. Now, I'm not disputing that Leon won the fight. I think Leon definitely won the fight. And I think all rounds are pretty clear. I think the fifth round is clear for Colby. But, I think Colby didn't fight the best fight. And I think Colby fought the fifth round like he fought the entire... If Colby fought the entire fight like he fought the fifth round, I think Colby could have won the fight, actually. Now, will Colby ever reach the belt? Ever? He's going to need some stuff to go his way, and he needs a fourth title fight. He would likely need to beat Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if the UFC throws Colby Covington and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson on this card. It would make sense if they did, but that fight I feel like is going to happen eventually. It might not be on this card, and it's the easiest fight for Colby in the top 10. It is. It is by far the easiest fight. Colby's going to go out there and he's going to dominate. Like, Colby doesn't get finishes often. He might get a submission in that fight against Wonderboy. But I don't feel like you can put Leon on this card against Bilal, because one, it's Bilal, and Leon, he did beat Colby, but wasn't the greatest fight. I don't feel like this can be the UFC 300 main event. However, I think this should be on UFC 300. I think it should be the co-main event. I think this should still be on the card. It should be the co-main event. Or I could see them doing this at a later date. I don't know. But it feels like this is going to be on the card. Let's just pray this isn't the main event. I don't think it will be. I think if it does go on the card, it will be a co-main event spot. And again, that's fine. It just can't main event. It really cannot main event. And this is a fight that, like, okay, I'd rather have Leon and Bilal main event. I just threw this on here. I'll go through this very quick. There is a slight chance Zhang Weili and Yan Xiaonan can main event because nightmare situation. Think about it. Leon Bilal falls through for 300. It's not actually on the card. They can't get Duplessis. They can't get Izzy. They can't even get Aspinall to sign on the line. They can't get the two guys in the fight that I'm going to talk about next. So we have to go to Zhang Weili and Yan Xiaonan. And now, given I think they would go to Gaethje and Holloway first for the main event, but you don't know what they're going to do because think about it, guys. The UFC 200 main event was Miesha Tate and Amanda Nunes. Now, nobody thought that fight was going to mark the start of the greatest run a women's fighter has ever had in Amanda Nunes. But still, they probably should have just ran with Mark Hunt and Brock Lesnar at the main event, or they could have just ran with Anderson Silva and DC. Now, I will not forget Anderson Silva had DC in some trouble at the end of the third round. It should have been a 5-round fight for the world championship. Anyways, I just hope this isn't the main event. I understand the significance of this fight. Chinese fighter versus Chinese fighter for the world championship. This fight is going to do numbers in China. It's going to be a really big deal. Yan Xiaonan will likely be a pretty sizable underdog. I got in around the plus 2-1 range, plus 200 range. Yan Xiaonan has won back-to-back fights against Mackenzie Dern and Jessica Andrade, but she is still actually 2-2 in her last 4, dropping fights to Carla Esparza and Marina Rodriguez. This fight cannot main event. I just threw it on here just as a nightmare situation. This would main event UFC 300 because, again, don't forget, Miesha Tate did main event main event 200. So I'm just saying this could happen. I highly doubt it will. The final fight I have is a fight that, honestly, I could definitely see happening as the main event. Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. Just because, again, Magomed just did defeat Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker keeps getting knocked out in cartoonish fashion at the first fight night of 2024. And Poatan, again, so he's a big draw, and he's probably the third, or maybe second biggest draw. I don't know. Because you think about star power, Pereira is one of the biggest guys they have because, of course, the Izzy rivalry. So if they can't get Izzy for the card, you might as well throw Alex Pereira on this card. Now, again, will this fight happen on UFC 300? I don't think it will because UFC 301 is supposed to be in Brazil. I think they're going to want Pereira in Brazil for that card. So I think this one will actually get pushed to UFC 301. But still, I think it's a possibility. If everything else falls through, then you could just put this as the main event for 300. And now if you need a Brazilian fight for the main event at UFC 301, Alexandre Pantoja can always fight it. Now, again, is that really the fight you want as the main event? No, I think you want Pereira to main event that card. If they really want to push things and Jaitan Almeida can beat Curtis Blades, they could say, all right, Gon, you're not getting the title fight. We can do Almeida versus Aspinall for the interim championship, just if they need a Brazilian fighter in the main event. However, I think it will be, I think in the main event 301 will be Pereira Ankalaev. If they need Pereira for 300, they can do Pantoja versus the winner of Moreno and Royval. I don't know because the flyweight division's in a weird spot too. I think Alex Pereira is going to go out there and fight at 301. However, I can definitely see this fight happening if everything else falls through. But I just thought I'd throw it on here. It is an interesting fight. Jamal Hill is not ready just yet to fight, I don't believe. So this would be the fight first, and the winner of this fight would fight Jamal Hill. As I wrap things up here, though, what fight do I actually think will main event UFC 300? Honestly, it will probably be this. I think it will be Duplessis Adesanya. I think this will be the main event they do go to. I think the co-main event will be Bilal Muhammad and Leon Edwards. I think they will get Duplessis to take the fight on short notice or, short recovery time. But again, for Duplessis, why not take the fight? You get Adesanya, huge pay-per-view draw, and you get pay-per-view points, something that you weren't going to get the last time you turned down Adesanya on short notice. And he's not all that injured, it's just face damage, right? I think Duplessis would be tempted to take this fight. And again, Adesanya would be a very, big draw for UFC 300. What would I personally like to see, considering the circumstances? This is the fight I want to see, Duplessis and Strickland. Now again, as much as I want to see Jared Cannonier get the title fight, I realize that it's not realistic to expect Jared Cannonier to main event UFC 300. And I think Jared Cannonier is probably going to have to go through Khamzat Chimaev. But now if he can go through Khamzat Chimaev, all the hype in the world goes to Jared Cannonier. Cannonier will get the next title fight. Jared probably, though, just needs one more fight. I personally would like to see this. I think Sean, again, I talked about earlier, I think Sean is a lot more deserving of the world championship shot than what Izzy is. So we will see, but those are the options for UFC 300. If you like this video, folks, make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like as well. Don't usually do videos like this. I primarily just do predictions about UFC, but again, I watch the sport so much, I can do videos like this where I just talk about the sport for hours as well. So folks, thank you all for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more, and Mamba forever.